All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. First, I'll start with a couple of introductions. First, there's myself, John Krajewski. I'm the Director of Product Management here at AVEVA, and I'm going to be joined briefly or shortly by Steve Weinrich, who is one of our program managers here at AVEVA Software. I'm going to start by just quickly addressing a few housekeeping issues, and then we'll go ahead and jump right into the webinar. We will be recording this presentation. A link will be sent out to all the attendees within 48 hours after the conclusion of this presentation. For those that have questions during the session, there is a tab in the user interface that allows you to enter questions. There will be a session at the conclusion of the presentation material where we will address the Q&A. For those of you who have any questions or issues with the actual webinar itself and don't want to hold that till the end, you can enter that right into the chat panel, and there are panelists there that'll be able to help you. And there is a handout that has been pushed into the handouts tab on your user interface showing a data sheet of the offer that we're going to be presenting to you today. So first, let me say welcome to everyone and thank you so much for joining our webinar. Here we're going to be talking about leveraging the world's first operations management interface, or OMI for short, as your digital transformation platform. This session will begin with some background material by myself, which is John Krajewski, and then Steve Weinrich will follow up with some demonstration. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and jump right into the presentation. System Platform is an offer that we took to market well over a decade ago. System Platform helped usher in a very new age of automation. We started working on addressing, at that point in time, unifying the traditional islands of automation that had existed in the system. What you're seeing on the screen here is feedback that we've taken from a lot of those System Platform users around the values that they have gotten from that System Platform application that they're using today. You know, things that were ushered in because of the focus that we had on a distributed application, things that were focused because we had a focus on a templatized system where you have standards management and everything is focused on ensuring that there's standardization and easily managing those standards. That's an area that we have been focusing on for a number of years with System Platform, and we've had success across nearly every industry vertical in every corner of the globe. We've got thousands of installations out there and have had extreme amounts of success with System Platform. Now, that being said, we're constantly challenging ourselves to think about what is next. So some of the things that we started looking at is that, imagine if we could move from operations focus to a wider enterprise focus. So much of the things that we're able to do and deliver with System Platform are being represented by those 4 points on the left-hand side of the screen. Those have been things that we have been focusing on for our current products. But as we have gone through with the evolution of both our organization, as we here are now with the larger AVEVA organization that we're part of today, as well as the general things that have happened in the industry, we've looked at several of the internal factors that were driving our business and what was happening to us as a company. And we set the goal of introducing the next major step change in process visualization and overall operations management. We had, when we talk about System Platform, initially started focusing on the back end, which is being able to do all the configuration, the distributed application, the management, being able to do the basics of data collection, data storage, supervisory control, and all those core backend components that are part of System Platform. We then took a step of adding a lot of the content, and we called those our Kester graphics, and we introduced those several years back, and that became a lot of the content focus. And our focus when we moved forward to the 2017 release really started looking at the container. What were we going to do? And so before we started looking at exactly how we were going to do things, we looked at why we would do things. And so those whys are being represented on the screen here. So we very closely engage with our customer base, and we want to understand what are the challenges they face. So if you look on the left-hand side here, we just see examples of like rising costs, aging assets, tightened regulations, cybersecurity. These are common industry challenges that we've heard across a wide section of our customer base. We also have the business imperatives that are driving their business. What are they trying to achieve? So not only the challenges that are facing them in their continual execution, but what are the aspirations they have for improved efficiencies, enterprise-wide visibility to improve their decision support, agility and change requirements, as well as operator productivity. And those were many of the examples of business imperatives. At the same time, there were technology trends that are changing and constantly introducing new opportunities. And so much of the focus of what we're trying to achieve with 2017 came with the background of these issues that were these industry challenges, the business imperatives our customers were trying to address, and the technology landscape that sat out there, and that's at that point in time. Well, a lot of our customers have been focusing on trying to drive these kind of outcomes and those business imperatives over a course of a number of years. And much of that effort has often resulted in a bunch of siloed information systems. So if they try to drive efficiencies, they would add systems to their operations. We've often speak with our customers and they talk about all the different islands of information. So I spoke earlier about islands of automation. Islands of information are a little bit different. We're not talking about unifying processes or process control areas, but often there's different investments in different software packages, whether they be kind of traditional OT packages like MES or batch or things like that, or you may have more IT type packages that are in there. It's like whether it's standard operating procedures, asset management applications, and a variety of other systems. But this is typically the landscape under which we see many of our customers operating. And so this notion of IT technologies and OT technologies being the core landscape of what our customers are dealing with, when we look at things like IT and OT convergence, and what types of problems are we trying to solve there? These are some of the key things that drove a lot of our thinking when it came to the aspirations of what we wanted to achieve at 2017. So we look here like some of the key benefits: faster response to an increased volume of events, business process improvements and insights, improved operational efficiencies with no downtime. One of the key things we recognized here is that likely the answers to a lot of these questions come from a variety of systems that are in place today. And that is kind of what we have focused on when it comes to IT and OT convergence. And a lot of times when people speak of IT and OT convergence, they talk about practices, and the practices that typical IT organizations follow and practices that OT organizations follow. And coming to a common set of practices as being a challenge. And that certainly is 100% true. But when you get beyond those practices in terms of the practical outcomes that can be delivered by operating as a single organization and being able to leverage all of that information, that is where we truly believe that there's a transformative capability. And that's really what we're going to be focusing on here today, is how do we take what we're doing with System Platform 2017 and put it in the hands of the entire industrial automation space for them to be able to achieve digital transformation. So moving System Platform from a common platform for automation and transforming it into a platform for all of automation, information, and visualization. And that is the true outcome that we're working on delivering. So I've set up a bit of the backdrop around, the what's and the whys. So let's talk a little bit about what do we do? How do we get here? And how might you leverage it? So I'm going to give you some examples along the way of some of the ways we were thinking. This particular diagram here is showing on the left-hand side a model. The model is the core of what System Platform is based upon. You build and you design an asset model. And in that asset, you can assign things. So you can assign things like process graphics. That's one of the things that we've done for years with System Platform. Now, as I mentioned earlier, moving from content to container, so a symbol would be an example of the content. On the right-hand side of the diagram you're seeing here, there's a layout. That's an example of what we would have as a container. So I associate my content with my model, and then my container will automatically consume that content. And we do this by tagging this with what we refer to as a content type. So in this particular example, you'll see on the right-hand side, this level 1, level 2, level 3. This was actually taken from the general notions of how you want to hierarchically organize content for best situational awareness in terms of multiple levels. Some people use 3 levels, some use 4, and that's not the point here. The notion here is that the highest level information is associated at the highest level in my hierarchy. In that particular case here, it's intake and its process. So any of the content that I associate with that intake and process will be placed in the level 1 pane. Any of the content I have at the second level, which is extruder and mixer, that goes into the level 2 pane. And any content I have at the level 3, which is the inlet, outlet, and transfer, that goes into the level 3 pane. So that way we can automatically drive what we refer to as this data-driven application vision. We had recognized that when our customers apply our technologies, in traditional methods, what they would do is you would create a window, put content on that window, and link windows together. And that is the way this industry has worked for several decades. But as we go into the next generation of what people are looking to accomplish, we recognize that there was no one target. It wasn't one window that you had to design. I needed to be able to have designs which were flexible. They could address whether in this particular case you see things like laptops, tablets, different portrait and landscape orientations, smaller devices like mobile, but even moving up into workstations, dual-headed workstations, control rooms, control room walls. And I want to consume that content and leverage that content across my organization in a variety of places. How do I do that if I have to design for one target? And that's where the power of this data-driven design really empowers us to be able to build these applications. One of the key things that's important, as you'll see it in the first bullet point on this particular slide, is this context. Let me talk about context-driven apps. Context is a notion of understanding what the operator is looking to do now and finding that information that's associated with it. So I'm going to back up one slide to be able to make that point of emphasis a little easier. So if my point right now of focus is the extruder, my level 1 context for that extruder is process, because the extruder is in the process area. It's not in the intake area, it's in the process. So if my current focus on the extruder, my L1 content is process, and that would be the content that goes in there. My L2 content clearly is the content associated with extruder. And my L3 content may be one of the devices at the bottom. Let's see if you're just going to pick the first one. It may be inlet valve, or it may be a series of things where I'm able to see all of my L3 contents and somehow in a tabular form in that L3 area. The key point here is that you have to be able to pass that context around and understand, how do I deal with that associated content? And this is one of the key tenets we've done around Operations Management Interface, or OMI. But we went further. We didn't just want to talk about how do we deal with traditional process graphics to be able to deal with multiple form factors. Well, that was currently one of our intentions. We also wanted to change at the root what people did with those applications. So we talk about on the first slide here, the first bullet point, the access to external applications. Accessing external applications was core. I mentioned those islands of information, unifying islands of information being part of this. Not all of that information resides inside of these AVEVA systems. Those systems may come from a variety of locations and vendors. We need to bring that in together. We need to be able to provide access to that operator in context. We need to be able to deal also with custom content and this notion of single sign-on. Everybody has security in all their applications. I don't want to log into 10 applications 10 times if I'm trying to unify across 10 systems. I'm going to log in once, access all this information through a common application that's specific to my system. I want to make sure that if that application is a tablet, I can use touch interface. If that application is a workstation, then I may use mouse and keyboard. But all these things should still be in a very common format. I want to leverage more information. So we put native into all of our graphic capabilities, the ability to pull information from our historian and play it back without any engineering. We work with existing process graphics, which means that if you've worked with our systems in any of the 30 years that we've been in business, you can bring that content forward, push it into OMI, and even use the SCADA playback function without having to re-engineering that. So zero engineering for you to leverage those. And some of the most exciting aspects are some of these new custom apps. So examples of some of those apps will be a mapping app that automatically will be able to take my information, show it contextually in its location, and around, as well as the surrounding information in that system. Leveraging maybe process graphics or symbols to contextualize that and put that information in a context with mapping information, perhaps weather information, GIS data, all in a single source, in a single user interface, and all built on a very portable technology. So I can take that to any device type like HTML5 allows. So I can take that, whether it's from mobile platforms or on into, again, the Windows systems and the control room applications, making sure that everything that I've designed here is extremely portable. Very exciting interfaces that we're talking about there. And when you take it beyond just the example of one or two apps, and you start talking about what we have seen in some of our most progressive customers is leveraging a number of applications. Many of our customers, when we speak to them, they report that on average, their operations teams will use between 15 and 20 pieces of software throughout the course of a day. But those applications are extremely disjointed. They're not brought together. And very often, it's only a few people who have access to all the information, or only a few people have access to some pieces, but nobody really has access to everything. What we want to achieve with operations management interface is to enable a fully integrated operations. So you're seeing here an example where in this multi-monitor system, I've got multiple systems. So I've got my 3D information applications tied in, as well as my full process model with my navigation. I have full live process graphics, all my alarms. I'm bringing all my operational KPIs. When we talk about 1D and 2D views, those are accesses of things like engineering things. I can bring design applications, or I can bring in my piping and instrumentation CAD drawings. I can bring in my 1D data, which is a list of attribute data that if I need to figure out information about an asset. I can integrate things like live camera feeds, but here we've only talked about a few examples. The opportunities are literally limitless in terms of what this can achieve, and we're extremely excited to see what our customers and what our ecosystem does with this technology. I think that's enough of the preamble that I've set there. And what I'd like to do now is go ahead and invite Steve Weinrich to go ahead and give us a demonstration of some of this collateral. And again, if you have questions as you go through here, feel free to enter them into the question tab. So Steve, one of the first things I'll do is go ahead and change presenter to you. So verify presenter change, yes. Steve, you should be now the presenter, and you should be able to go ahead and share your content.
All right, great. Let me see what, all right, there we go. We're up and going, and thank you very much, John. I appreciate the great introduction there. And we have certainly got a lot to show today. And as John mentioned, if you do have any questions or things you might want to get more information about, feel free to enter those into the question area, and we'll answer them now, or we can follow up after the webinar. So let's jump right into it. We have a lot to cover today. So what I'm showing right now is one of our core demonstration applications that we've created with InTouch OMI. Central to this application is the idea of what John had mentioned, which is context. Now, we're integrating a lot of different pieces here, and we'll go through each of those, but the idea being that as you look at this from an operator's perspective, you're able to see your level 1, level 2, level 3, the different areas that you're focused on, and additional information flows into this application visually as you drill down into the different areas that you're concerned about. So let's take a look at some of the aspects of this app, give you a little roadmap to it, and then we'll drill into the details as to why this is a very large game changer in this the industry. So up here on the top, we have a basic button bar that allows us to navigate to different areas within the application. And over here on the left, we can open up our hamburger menu, and we can see a hierarchical menu of the areas that we have within our application. And as we start moving around inside the application, you'll see that many of the different apps, the different frames load up with different content. And for example, we can see this map app over here, and this is an HTML5 map. And as I zoom in and zoom out, I happen to be using my mouse. I can also use touch and pinch and zoom. But as I'm moving around, different content is appearing at the different levels of zoom, very much in context with where I am in the application. So for example, if I go to the entire United States, the map automatically zooms out. Over here on the left, I can see that I have a list of a particular set of symbols, and these symbols are looking at trends in those particular areas. So we have the Midwest has an issue we can see, and the Southeast has an issue. So I can drop down this list and see those additional items here and select one of them, or I can simply click on the item. As I click on the item, I'm drilling down into that context. You can see my breadcrumb has driven me down further. I can see now within the Midwest. I can see the states that are associated with the Midwest. So we're seeing here the context-driven concept. Here in the center area, we can see that we have several different tabs of information and applications that are part of this application as a whole. So when John talked about islands of information, this is really how OMI is a game changer. Unlike other applications where we need to pull information into a common store and then bring those together through a singular way of viewing them, either tabular or a singular graphic way, OMI allows you to simply link into those applications and display them live within your system and with context. So for example, here we're pointing at Insight. And in this particular situation, our Insight chart is looking at the Midwest. If I change the context and I move to a different location, say Indiana, the Insight app responds to that context change, as did the map, as did my list of KPIs, as did my web lookup, happens to look at Indiana. If I happen to move over to, say, Missouri, there we go. We can see that, again, these apps throughout the entire larger view app have changed context. So let's back up for a second and talk about why this is so powerful. In a typical scenario, when you're building an application, your job as an application builder is to write a lot of scripting. And I'm here to show this and show all the power and everything we're seeing today with no scripting. That's the power of OMI. And being able to provide all of this context-rich navigation without having to write all the scripting, having to write all the pieces and parts yourself. So John had talked about how we took a step back and reviewed what have we done for the last 10 or 20 years in this industry? What has not changed and what has changed? Well, the one thing that has changed, as he mentioned, is the job scale and scope of an operator. No longer are they focused on just having one particular area that they're able to look at, that they're responsible for. No, they have to look all over the entire plant and usually outside of the plant to get more data about why their operations are going the way they are and how they can improve them. So using OMI as our delivery mechanism, we have brought together some very powerful capabilities that we've built into OMI, so you don't have to build them yourself. We've already built them for you. For example, the map app. I know there was a question as to whether this app is included, and yes, it is. As is the alarm app, the trending, our web app, so you can put in web content directly, just point it to any URL that you would like. We have our alarm app. Now you can see there's two versions of our alarm app going on here. We have the alarm app here in the center, and that particular one is looking at the context that we're in, so we're in the Southeast. So we see Tennessee and Georgia. It's also down here, but we also, in this one in the center, we have additional capabilities in our command bar. So we're able to reuse these apps, drag and drop. They function as you'd expect, very quickly and easily without writing a bunch of scripting to try to make it all function. So we'll take a look at that here in a second, but I do want to show you one additional thing. As we look at the context that we're in, we can see that this particular piece of content is another web browser in the same way that this would be here. But over here, the web browser is pointed at the weather website, but it has a additional context that we've given to the weather website, telling it that we'd like to look at the Southeast. So just by providing some additional context from our application into somebody else's application that's residing somewhere else completely in the world. We're able to get very highly contextual data visualized right there for the operator. So one other thing I wanted to touch on before we went too much further is just some of the highlights. As a techie, I know John's smiling now. As a techie, I kind of like some of these. These are really powerful things that look simple. They took a lot of time, a lot of engineering, but definitely saves everyone else a lot of time because we already did it for you. So one of the things I want to look at here is this idea of alarm aggregation. Here in our breadcrumb, as well as in the tree, you can see here, we have these small numbers with some icons next to them that are really indicating the number of alarms within the area that you're looking at. So here we can see that within the United States, there are currently 4 alarms. And if we open that up, sorry, there's 8 total. There's 2 that are critical, 2 that are medium. And if we open that up, we can see that within the Midwest, there's 2. So we have 1 in Missouri, 2 different alarms in Missouri and 2 different alarms in North Dakota. A big advantage here is that you can visually very quickly see that this is kind of grayed out. And that means that those alarms do not reside on this particular item. They reside further down. So let's take a look at Missouri, and we can start looking at the things that are going on in Missouri, why there's a problem in Missouri. And we have all the context right here in front of us. We can look at our trend. We can add pens into our trend manually, but automatically the trend is updated to match whatever we're selected on. So if I move into, say, Minnesota, my pens update to show just the Minnesota data flows. So I think we've talked a lot about some of the context aspects here. One other final thing before we move over into the more technical area of how did we build this thing, I want to look at the map app and just give you a little more detail on what's really happening here. If we pop out to the United States and maybe go into the Northeast, that just happens to be where I am here in Pennsylvania, we can see that these little indicators that are popped up, they have the different names on them and the current values within those KPIs within those states. Those, if you look a little more closely, you can see that these are actually our Kester graphics. Now, our Kester graphics, for those of you who may not know, are the common graphic format that we use throughout all of System Platform. InTouch OMI is a completely rewritten visualization engine for our Kester graphics. It's multi-threaded and highly performant, and it can load hundreds of thousands of individual elements per second and manage those across multiple monitors. So our Kester graphics sitting on top of this HTML5 based map is extremely powerful. So this map app, while kind of out of the box, it provides a basic map provider. We can add on different layers. We can add on temperature and precipitation forecasts, etc. Again, just pulling in data from the outside world, giving context to what's going on. But again, the point is we're looking at our Kester graphics sitting here live. So the question is, who drew the map and how did it get there? Same thing over here on the left. I have all these trends, sitting here for Connecticut, Delaware, Maine. Did I have to do that? Did I have to manually put each of these things into this list because I'm looking at the Northeast? What if we add another state or merge a state? Kind of grasping for straws there, but for an example. But as these things happen, as things change in the real world, you need to have a dynamic system that will update those based on the changes that you make in one place and not have to make them over and over. So that said, let's take a look at a little bit about how this all comes together. So first thing we're going to do is hop over to what we call our View App Editor. I'm going to switch back to the view of the actual app running, and you'll see that In this app, we have these different, what we call panes within this particular layout. You saw that we have the navigation that can come in here on the left, the navigation tree. Up here, we have a slide-in pane that gives us some values that we look at, these KPI values from each state. And over here on the right, we have this big adjustment screen that we have to show all the different types of capabilities you can change during runtime. And then down here at the bottom, another powerful feature is our SCADA playback, which we'll cover. Hopefully, we'll have time to cover that a little bit later. But all of this can be seen in our View App Editor. So the goal of the View App Editor is to provide you a single place that you go to edit all of your content and your application and how it all fits together. Just to give you a little bit of a roadmap here, what you're seeing over here on the left is the navigation. John talked about having data-driven applications and context. At the core of every application that pretty much anybody on this phone, on this webinar has ever made is based on a map in their head, whether it's a hierarchical map or a vector map. There's something in their head that's showing, when you click here, you go to this screen. When you click here, it goes to this other screen. We've seen that in every application we've ever looked at from any customer, doesn't matter which application they're using. So to take away a lot of that effort that's required and to unify that into a manageable model, we've created the navigation model for you. Now, by default, that navigation model is the same asset model that you've already created in the Kester IDE within System Platform. You don't have to use that one. You can add your own, make your own elements in here. You can create your own navigation items, but we provide this navigation out of the box for you, so you don't need to go and recreate it. And furthermore, if it changes in the Kester IDE, then if it changes in the Kester IDE, it'll change over here in the View app. So let's take a little bit more deeper view into what the View App Editor is providing us. A key aspect of the View App Editor is WYSIWYG. What you see is what you get. So these panes over here on the sides are slide-in panes. This center area is our main viewing area. And these are called layouts. This is what you're seeing here is a single layout that's split up into various panes. And up here in the top, we can see that we're looking at a screen setup that has a single high definition screen. And we also have within that particular screen, we can see that we have a layout that's divided up into multiple panes. The key here is that the screen profile doesn't have to have just a singular screen, right? It can have multiple screens. And those multiple screens can then be managed within the application, even if you only have, say, for example, one high def monitor on your engineering station. You can still design an application that has multiple monitors, and you can design that even just with that singular monitor. You can run that application on your engineering station with a single monitor and see all three monitors if that's what you have. We have demos right now that are running on 8 monitors. But they were all designed and built on a single monitor station. All right, so let's talk a little bit about how all of this content comes together. So if we go back to our runtime view app, we can see that if we're focused on, let's zoom over here to the Midwest. And over here in the Midwest, we can see that we have content for all of these states. And over here on the right, we have a map and we have the alarms, et cetera. So let's take a look at how all that came together. So I'm going to go over here to the Kester IDE. And in the IDE, I can see that I'm going to move over here to my model. And I can see my, if I go to the Midwest where I was, so, okay, give me a second. I'm going to hop back over to my other app, make sure I'm in the right spot. My Midwest, yep. Good. And in the Midwest, we can see that we have all these different states that are in the Midwest. Now, I checked John's math on this to make sure that we had all of our states accounted for, which we do, which is great. So if we take a look at, for example, Indiana, let's take a look at Indiana and see what this particular state looks like. So this state that we have has a target for the flow and a total. And here in the center, we can see that there's different pieces of content. And if we look a little bit closer, we can kind of recognize some of these look somewhat familiar. They're a little plain Jane here in the editor, but that's pretty much what they look like. Okay, I understand that. I can see how that fits together, but they're grayed out. And the reason they're grayed out is it means because they come from our template. And this is the power of standardization. John talked about how for the last decade and a half we've been working on standardization. So we're taking that power from a modeling standpoint, from an information standpoint, and moving it into the visualization area. So how, if I'm on Indiana over here in my Midwest area and I click on Indiana, how did all of this come together? How did I get this on the map and over here? So let's take a look. Indiana, if we look at our object information, is based on a template called state. So if we go over to our state template, which I already have open, we can start seeing now these aren't grayed out. We can see the actual content that was created for that particular state, for the template. So we can see that this piece of graphic, let's double click on this, open this up. This graphic was created with a set of placeholders, and these placeholders are there to help define what it is that's going to be displayed based on whatever state it happens to be on. So we're using this thing called relative referencing me.total flow or flow total, etc. And the name is the same as the name of the state. So now that I've attached this to my template, I'm now able to create an instance called Indiana, and Indiana has the information inside of it to generate this information right here, this linkage. So without doing any scripting, without doing any manual work as far as dragging and dropping things into place or updating large tables, etc., I've simply taken the generic graphic that's giving me my map marker, or my generic graphic that I'm using for all of my states for the high-level KPIs, and now using the apps that are already built into InTouch OMI, I'm able to create an application simply by saying over here on the left within my view app editor, anything that is of a particular type of graphic that is on my current asset. If you've been listening to the webinar and you're wondering, when do we get to the punchline? When do we get to the money? This is it right here. Because in my view app editor, I'm showing content that's of type faceplate, or my dynamic content if I have web content, my main content, which contains all my tabs, or my map. That's all I've done, is indicated what is the content type that I want to put into these panes. InTouch OMI at runtime handles everything else for me. It reads my model, it reads all that information and generates those. So what else can I do? What else is powerful about this context? Well, it's not just the current context, but it's also being able to move around inside that context. So if we look at the Midwest, we can see that, for example, Missouri has a problem. Great, so let's click on Missouri. And if we're in the Missouri area, there we go, we can see what Missouri is all about. Look at our alarms, our trending. But we can also navigate through the rest of this list. So we can see we're going to go to Nebraska and then North Dakota. So I click on this, and I can naturally navigate to Nebraska, and then I can go to North Dakota. But this also works at other levels. So if I'm in the United States and I click on, let's say, the Northeast, I'm now able to move down to the Southeast, to the Southwest. So this works with touch, it works with the mouse, lots of different environments. All the other pieces and parts that you're used to seeing and working within a visualization like what you would get in, excuse me, in our Kester graphics, all still work even with this context switching. So naturally navigating is a very powerful element that allows you to move around and explore the environment from a visual perspective rather than having to select items on a list or constantly bring up a big list. You can move around inside that just by navigating quite naturally. Another area that I wanted to touch on real quick, let's see, stretch the map app, resize the pane. Oh, of course I can do that. There we go. So resizing the pane, and Omar had mentioned this to me a little earlier. Thank you for that. As we resize elements within the application, because all of these panes are resizable, content will react appropriately. It won't stretch out of its aspect ratio. It won't be displayed in some strange way. It won't ruin the fonts, etc. But as we move around inside this app, we can see that as the cached content is brought in through the internet, probably competing with my voice over my data line here, we can see that we can have more space, or if we don't need that much space, we can just shrink it down and dedicate that space to something else. All right, one other thing I wanted to talk about real quick before we move over to our other piece of our demo is the pan and zoom functionality, which is inherent within our Kester graphics, but is also available within other aspects of the apps. And the idea being that while you may have a lot of information here on the screen, you don't have space for all the information. In a more traditional HMI, SCADA system, you may see very dense graphics that show every possible piece of information that you may ever need as an operator. And while that's certainly interesting, that you can jam that much in there, it does preclude a lot of things, for example, operational awareness and situational awareness of those operations that are going on. So what we've done is provided a way quite naturally to allow the operator to see the larger picture, but as they have issues and things they want to zoom in, as they zoom in and they can pan around inside the system, we provide progressive disclosure. Now, this happens to be the underlying items that are sitting on the P&ID drawing. These names will probably be on the placards on the devices that are out there for the level indicated controller and the pumps and the flow indicated controllers that are out there, etc. So as you zoom back out, those items disappear and get out of the way quite naturally, as you'd expect. Excuse me. And again, this is done without scripting. This is simply done by saying, what zoom level do you want those things to appear? And at what level do you want them to disappear? So we have a lot of built-in power in the framework, and that's really what the last piece that I want to talk about before we jump over to the last piece here. And that is that at a high level, OMI provides a lot of capability out of the box. And that is really a big piece of the power of the application itself. And providing you with these applications, the navigation apps, alarming, trending, web, mapping, collection applications, all of those things built in with security, context, etc. Those things are there so that you can get started very, very quickly and get your application up and going without spending a lot of time trying to figure out how to build these different visual elements. So without further ado, let me drop down out of this, and I want to hop over to my other system. Give me just 1 second. Hold on a second. Let me. There we go. And we'll share that in just a second. I just need to reconnect my other system. And then we'll be going. So the last piece that I want to show everyone, and I'll bring up the screen here in just a second, is an item that I'm sure you've seen, and I'm pretty sure we had a screenshot of this in the high level. There we go, in the high level view of the webinar. There we go. And now I should be able to see my screen. Let me share that. There we go. All right. And what we're showing right now is a very exciting piece of this webinar, and something I've been really looking forward to showing. And it's the integration of InTouch OMI along with our AVEVA Net, and it's the 1D, 2D, and 3D engineering platform. Now, AVEVA Net as a whole is a engineering data storage and access system. It is designed to hold immense amounts of engineering data, including P&IDs, documents, PDFs, pretty much anything you can imagine, including 3D diagrams. So what we're showing is how you can take InTouch OMI, which is what we've all kind of been watching here as we've been moving along, and integrate a very large third-party system very quickly, and provide that context out to that application at runtime. So let's take a look at this and see what it is what we're trying to show here. So let me hop over to, there we go. So what I'm showing is that I have actually 3 separate screens, and unfortunately for this webinar I only have one. So I'm making sure there's plenty of space for the 3D, because that really is the fun stuff to watch. So there we go. And what we're seeing here is we're a liquid natural gas plant. And this screen that I'm moving around here is our process screen that shows all the current process data that's going on in the system. We can see that here in the de-ethanizer, we're actually having an issue. We'll drill down in there and see that. Down here in the bottom, we have some more detailed screen. We have a video camera that's checking out the area. So as I click on the de-ethanizer and bring that into context, I can start to see that there are some problems with these pumps. Now, these condensate pumps that recirculate this back in and from the reflux area, they're not working correctly. So I'm going to click on one of these, and as I click on this, you can see that immediately the 3D diagram will update. I'm going to zoom out here a little bit, and we can see a little better what it is we're looking at. We can see that it zoomed in on the pump that I clicked on. So it's this pump here. I'm going to pop back over to that screen. I apologize for the context switching. But we can see in our P&ID drawing that when I clicked on that pump in my process screen, it brought that pump up in my P&ID drawing. If, on the other hand, I'm going to zoom out a little bit in my P&ID, and I can see that this is my stack here in the center. I'm going to zoom in. There's a flow control valve that I know happens to generally cause us some problems. It's kind of sticky. So I'm going to click on this guy in the P&ID drawing this time. And when I click on that, what it does is it drives the context throughout the rest of the application, especially into the 3D. So I'm able to see that that valve is now sitting in context in the 3D environment. Furthermore, we can see that these pumps, which are representative of the pumps that are on the P&ID drawing down here at the bottom that we saw earlier, as well as in the process diagram, which I'll bring up here, we can see they're sitting here. So not only are we able to drive the context to move things around visually, we can also drive context to show what's actually happening in the real world. So now we see that this pump that I just turned on to try to solve this problem where my reflux is not moving, this pump just turned green within the 3D model. So this is not a static image, right? This is not a static model that I've loaded into memory. This is a live model that's being driven by live process data out in the real world. Now, in this particular case, during this webinar, it's a simulator running in the background. But as you can see, there's not a lot of static aspects of this at all. So these systems, the integration of the AVEVA 3D, the 2D, which is our P&ID drawing, and the 1D, which is our detail data sheets, these are done relatively quickly, within about a month and a half of the time that we thought about it to the time we were able to demo it at shows. The engineering team was able to design it, build it, and get it out the door. We'll be productizing this and delivering it within the Q1, early Q2 timeframe. So with that, I'm going to wrap up, and I'm going to leave folks to ask questions. I'm going to hand this back over to John, and so that he can follow up with any additional details that he had and go from there. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much, Steve. Fantastic job. Pretty exciting stuff you were showing there. So I'm going to go ahead and proceed on with just a couple extra slides, and then we'll proceed to the Q&A section. You saw a lot of apps that Steve was showing, some fantastic apps. How do you get more apps? Our apps are actually posted on a website that we call the Digital Exchange. You can see the URL here on the screen at exchange.aveva.com. We're constantly adding new apps to the system. We actually have a plan in the next couple of weeks. We're going to be adding a new app for document viewers and video players and more. And we have a huge backlog of stuff that we plan on working there. But there's an entire software developer kit that's accessible to everybody. It's part of every installation. It's distributed with free of charge. You can have that software developer kit, and we will actually work together with any third party, any partner who wishes to build on this platform to get your information onto here, and we can help promote and bring it into the system. So you can reach out to us. You can see here is a contact email address at digitalpartner@aveva.com, and that will help you to get you through that process for those of you who may be looking to get apps put onto here. So for many of those technology partners and or system integrator partners, or perhaps you're even an end user that's built a piece of technology and you want to leverage that technology for the greater ecosystem, then absolutely that can be done. So I think with that, I'll move on to the next point here and just kind of start closing out here. Hopefully you've seen some pretty intriguing things here. System Platform 2017, we believe we have ushered in a new standard in automation. And when we first brought in System Platform, we really changed the game with our object approach. Instead of focusing on small entities like variables or tags, we focused on entire assets. We're continuing to expand that and provide new experiences that go even beyond the traditional aspects. So when we talk about operations management interface, how does that differ from HMI? Hopefully, over the last hour, you've noticed that it's greatly different. We do a lot of the traditional things. Yes, there are process graphics. Yes, you can control your process, but it gives you an end-to-end industrial automation platform that is a foundation for IT and OT convergence. Hopefully, you saw a good aspect of that. Hopefully, you saw through what Steve showed you how easy it is to build these things, how easy it is to manage, and how accessible it will be for all organizations of all types. And ultimately, we believe we've helped you to power your digital transformation. We've talked to so many customers that have so many visions that go in different ways, and luckily at this point we have not found any particular customer applications that could not gain value from applying the concepts that Steve was just demonstrating for you. We're extremely excited about this, and we believe that this sets a foundation for us for many years to come. This becomes the core visualization platform for industrial visualization with AVEVA. So with that, I thank you so much today for your attendance.